Hello. Hey everybody, welcome to the show. It's my face! Try to be good. Don't snipe at people in chat. There are no dumb questions, only dumb streamers. Hello, hi. Hey, I hope you folks enjoyed that patch. Let me turn this down a little bit. We'll probably switch to some state Azure. And I know that people are... I know you face an overwhelming compulsion to comment on all of this. But we have a strict rule. I know I'm smiling, but it's real. It's a real rule, and the mods will stomp on you for it, and I will support them, that we do not talk about the appearance of the streamer, either positive or negative. That's the rule, is that we respect the streamer. And I know that you think you're being complimentary, and perhaps you are, but it would be hypocritical of us to only accept positive comments, and then the mods would have to make judgment calls about, well, was that really positive, or was that a backhanded compliment, or whatever. I see this with other streamers, mostly women, and it disgusts me. It disgusts me when people spend all their time talking. That's not what we're here for. I know. I've got the hair. I've got it all the time. I live with it, so we all know about the hair. That's fine. If you feel compelled to say something like, gosh, Matt, you look tired, or something incredibly insulting that you would never say to a random stranger, which is what I am. If you cannot help yourself from commenting on things like that, I understand, but the mods will appropriately lash out at you. I hope you folks enjoyed that patch. I spent a lot of time on it, but the reality is, as I go and I look at, like, there's a modular synthesis musician that I like quite a lot, who makes great generative, which is what that was. Generative, which is to say, random but pretty is the idea. Great generative patches, and it looks like he's only using 4 modules. He's got his camera right there, and you go, I've got those 4 modules. How do I make it do that sound? And he's got a Patreon, and you give him $5 and you can see his patch notes, which will actually explain the patch. Oh, great. If I have an explanation. And then you go and you give him the money at the Patreon and you download the patch notes, and it turns out that there's 4 modules in the video, but he's got a whole synth and a keyboard off screen, thousands of dollars worth of kit doing arpeggios and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh man. So it's not demoralizing, it's misleading. It leads us, the aspiring modular ambient nerd, into thinking that, oh, all you've got to do is get those modules and patch them like this. And like, no, a lot of these folks, they spend hours working on these patches. And I probably spent about an hour, 90 minutes. Thanks, Duroc. I'll check there. Working on this patch, but really, to make it sound really the way I want, it would probably take 3 or 4 or 6 hours noodling in on one patch, because there's all sorts of little tiny adjustments you could make, like rings. Rings right now is going into the Magneto, and the Magneto is great if you can afford it. It's fantastic because it's basically like a tape delay, right? A 4-head tape delay plus a lo-fi junkie all smashed together. And so that's where you get this kind of warbly sound from rings, because you're not actually hearing any of rings. You're only hearing the echoes of rings in the Magneto. And the Magneto has settings like, tape, wow and flutter is one knob, and tape crinkle is another knob. And these are all things you can mathematically model that make rings have that warbly sound. Well, you can go into just rings and just modulate, take an LFO and modulate like the brightness or the dampness to create even more kind of resonance. And then the other thing I didn't do, which I should have done, is I was using the octone as the sequence. I was using chants to create rhythms, because chants will do a thing where it's still early. Everybody hang in there. I'll wake up eventually. Every coin toss, it will generate a burst of triggers in what it calls a rhythm. But it's not really a rhythm. It's just a certain number of triggers spaced apart. Like, it'll go, give me 2 triggers this time. And it'll go, okay, ping, ping. And then you toss the coin. It'll say, give me 6 triggers this time. And it'll go, okay, ping, 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 ping. But they're always evenly spaced out. There's not actually a rhythm, right? So getting that burst of triggers is nice, but what I should have used was grids, which if you turn the chaos knob all the way up, it'll take that ping, 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 and it'll turn into ping, 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 and that's a nice rhythm. And then I can modulate that so it's not the same every time. So that would take another, and that would create a much more musical sound, I think. Also, I probably should have used, I was playing around with different scales, and the thing is, like, it's not, I don't think it's enough to just have 8 notes. So the octone's got 8 steps, and I just had each one tuned to a different note, right? And then I turned it to random. So it's just going to produce 8 random notes, or it's going to produce random notes from a set of 8. Probably could use marbles for this. It'll random from a set of 8. And then I would play around with the scale, and that does make a difference. But really, I think what would make a bigger difference is limiting the number of notes more. Only having 4, if I only had like 4 or 6 notes to choose from, then it would sound more musical and more melodic. Anyway, so yeah, and that's I also cheated a little bit because I was listening. It's another one of those things where I've got all these modules and I feel like it's cheating to use more than one effects module for some reason, right? I want to like pick an effects module and then that's my end of chain. But then you go online, you look at these modular synth videos and they don't do that. And so for me, it seems like cheating, but I took rings, produced a bunch of resonant notes that start to sound like chords, right? Because multiple notes are ringing out. And then I just recorded them into clouds and then froze the buffer, turned the mix all the way over. So it's all you're hearing is that saved buffer being scrubbed through. And that's kind of the bed that lays underneath the magneto playing rings. So there's about 3 people in chat who are like, ah, and then everybody else is like, hello, Enoch Romero, I bet. Last time we streamed, my friend Paul Laporte was in chat, and I didn't see him until I was watching the stream back. So, Paul, if you see this, hi, I miss you. One of my favorite people. I miss our time together. That was an epic time in our lives. All right, let's go and see what people are saying about me. Well, probably not about me. Probably about other stuff like the dungeons, the dragons. Graduating from college, Corey says. Wow, you buying? Good luck. I've got a lot of modules, and they all do different things for different purposes. But I really don't find that about half the modules I have are for composition. But I find composing using modular really tedious. That's why I end up just doing ambient patches because I like them. Don't get me wrong, I really like them. But I have ideas for songs, and I want to. And you can kind of with modular, you can kind of compose a part. You can go, okay, here's a part, but songs have multiple parts, and going from one part to another, you can do it. There are lots of ways to do it. I've got a couple of sequencers that will let me go, here's part 1, here's part 2, or part A, part B, part A, part B, part A, part C, part A, part B, right? And that would be like a song. But that is incredibly tedious to do. And I start thinking I should just use a DAW. I should just use it, which I don't want to do because I don't know how they work. So good luck with you on your synth journey. Jenny Marsh! As a player or DM, how do you continue to play with somebody who makes you uncomfortable? Who, after asked not to, says too many sexual comments. I don't know if somebody, I don't pay a lot of attention listening to political speeches, but I noticed that President-elect Biden often, I don't know if he still does this, I don't think he does, he often during the campaign would say, all too often horrible things happen to people. And I'm like, bro, has no one told you that construction implies that there's a right number of times for something awful to happen? All too often. And I was like, man, if I were that dude. But that's the thing when you're dealing with a candidate, you can't, if they have, everybody has patterns of speech. And if you clamp down on that too hard, then they get overloaded and they can't give a speech because they're trying to hold in their head all these, don't do this and don't do that. So how do you continue to play with somebody who makes you uncomfortable? Well, listen, there's no mandate. There's no moral or cultural imperative to play D&D with these people. I've said this before. I don't know if I've said this. I'm pretty sure I've said this in a video, but we might have to do a whole video on problem players. Because the thing that I don't like is I don't like the idea that I, as the dungeon, I've got enough to do. I've got enough responsibilities sitting behind the screen. And a lot of those responsibilities I accept, I like, I was at dinner I often will have people say Matt likes Matt likes sitting at the head of the table when we go out to eat. Matt likes sitting at the head of the table because then he's like the dungeon master, right? Or less charitably, I have friends who don't get me wrong, I appreciate their point of view, who says no, Matt just likes being in control. And somebody said that at dinner once, and my then girlfriend said he likes sitting at the head of the table because his hearing is really bad, and if he doesn't see your mouth moving, he does not necessarily know you're talking. Which is true, by the way. Like if I'm not looking at you, if I can't see you, it becomes a lot harder for me to even realize there is someone talking. I don't know what that is. I think it's because I had really, really, really bad ear infection. Like really go to the hospital, give him medication, ear infections, and not just one, a bunch of them when I was like 4, 5, 6. So yeah, I've got enough responsibilities behind the screen, and I like being behind the screen. I have, somebody who's got a certain amount of charisma or a certain air of authority or speaks with a certain authority makes a great dungeon master, right? Because the players are naturally going to listen when they start speaking. So I'm happy to do all that stuff. But I don't accept the responsibility of having to unfuck the personalities at the table. I'm not your mom. I'm not your dad. I'm not your boss. In some cases, I'm your boss. So what I like to do is a roundabout way of saying what I like to do is I say, hey, is anybody else bothered by this? And I put it to the table and I make it the table's problem, right? And that usually works. And sometimes I'll talk to people about it. I'm going to do this ahead of time to make sure that I'm going to have support, and say, hey, does this bother you, this thing that this person does? And I've seen that. I've had lots of girls at my table who it was never bad. I've never had friends that were bad in the sense that I was like, what the hell? I've never had that happen. I've known people who played in games like that, but I've been really lucky with my friends. But I have definitely played with mixed groups where there was a misalignment of expectations regarding what was appropriate. And every time that happens, the girls would play along, right? They knew how to behave in order to be one of the gang and stuff like that. But that bothers me. That expectation that you should have to quote unquote play along bothers me. So I try to, socializing people is tricky. And if in a perfect world, we would all get socialized by the time we left high school, but that doesn't happen. And some people make it in their entire lives without ever being properly socialized. And that process of rubbing off the rough edges, it can be painful and tricky. But yeah, I try to throw it out to the group, and also, perhaps not I've seen people better than me do this, so I don't feel too bad about it, but I will, score points off people. I will take the piss out of people who are doing that and put them down, make fun of them in kind of a cruel way, a very, very lightly cruel way, right? You know what I'm talking about? That it's a very kind of masculine one-upsmanship type of thing. And I've got the microphone, I'm sitting behind the damn screen, so that gives what I say a lot of authority. And that's kind of a very schoolyard way to go about doing things, but sometimes that kind of stuff is effective. I don't think everybody can do that. But yeah, when if you've already talked to the person, at the end of the day, throw it to the group. And if that doesn't work, just say, listen, I'm not comfortable playing with this person. Maybe we should play something else. If it's D&D that brings that out in them. Or, worst comes to worst, you could just tell them, I don't want to run with you anymore, man. It's crappy because, right, like our entire lives basically these days are designed to make it easier and easier for us not to have to interact with people we don't like. All of this technology makes it so we can get through our day without having to interact with people that we don't like. And D&D requires you to get a bunch of people together at the table. And that doesn't always work. Boa 249, $20. Thank you very much. Thank you for hanging out here. Let's turn this down. So yeah, more work on that patch, probably another hour or two, and it would really start to dial in. That's the trick, is that generative ambient makes it seem easy to create something. You can, in about an hour, you can get 80% of the way there, but then it's gonna be another 4 or 5 hours to get that last 20%. But that's just music, right? There's, people that spend hundreds of hours on a song. I can spend 6 hours, and I enjoy it. I completely lose track of time as I'm noodling in on some of these things. It's like a lot of things though, where you can spend 40 minutes on something and not get any closer to what you were trying to hear. And that gets really frustrating, but you just got to stick with it. So speaking of sticking with it. Oh, look, there's my live stream on YouTube. God, that's what my hair looks like? Jesus. Yeah. Stand by. Don't go anywhere. Nobody go anywhere. Let's... This is going to be too loud. Let me turn it down ahead of time. There we go. That should be hearable. Obi Shaker is going to do a slow burn. The reason I'm doing a slow burn is every player is new. That's fine. Yeah, that makes sense. There's nothing like I did see a couple of comments like this, and it always kind of not many. We're talking like 2. That last video was really successful, by the way. Lots to talk about, I think, today. Anyway, yeah, I saw a couple of people be like, "Well, I like a slow burn." I was like, I literally said, like, I usually go hot start, slow burn, because a hot start requires a lot of artifice, which usually means prep. And after that, regardless of how successful the game was, I want to just go back to exploring the wilderness and dungeons and normal, let's start at first level and you meet in the tavern. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with slow burn. But I do think that starting with something, I don't want people to get the impression that a slow burn means sandbox or open world, because I think that starting with a sandbox where the players have lots of choices, it's really time intensive. Like I literally would prep 4 or 5 different entire adventures and then put them all in front of the players to create this sense of a dynamic world. I think new players like the railroad. They like, because they're so overwhelmed with options and choices that drastically limiting them when they first start playing is a huge weight off their shoulders. Robert Paul, man with 2 first names, threw me $20. Thank you very much, Bob. And just wrote the plot of Ocean's 11. I haven't seen Ocean's 11. I saw the original, by the way. I should. I don't know how that series passed me by. I don't really know why I love Steven Soderbergh. I love everything that dude does. Thank you for the $20, Matt B. And I hope you enjoy the first 2 Dune videos, and I hope you'll enjoy the next one. Have I seen the new Dune board game? Not really. My friends and I don't get together and play board games anymore. So hopefully next year. I don't know. I'm in, I will probably be, unless my age, I've got a couple of comorbidities, like legit comorbidity factors. So I might be in a phase 2 or a phase 3 rollout. But probably I'm in Golga Frinsham Arc Ship B, and I'll be in phase 4 with all the other hairdressers and stenographers or whatever. I don't remember what. I don't remember who was in the Golga Frinsham Arc Ship B, but I'm probably there. So I probably will not be getting a vaccine between now and spring, but probably next year. That would be nice. And then I definitely think that there's going to be a period where I'm going to really work hard not to take for granted what I had before when it comes to have my own office, and I've got an awesome gaming table and lots of friends, and let's play games more often. Let's play games in person more often. It was easy to take that for granted before the pandemic. Ferris Deus, thank you for the $5. I'm glad you liked the video. Steve McClanahan, $5. Thank you. In reference to people who make players uncomfortable. Yeah, John Wick, who I know and I've played games with. That guy ran L5R for me. It was a hot start. My character. After I said, I probably know more about Rokugan than anybody here at the table. So I'm happy just being in the background and being kind of like almost like an NPC. And for them to be the main characters, had my character plummet to earth as a flaming comet from the sky. That was a hot start. Yeah, don't make me be a jerk. Yeah, I mean, you could. That's a way of meta contextualizing having a problem player, is saying, listen, I tried to stop this kind of behavior, but it didn't seem to work. So I don't want to be a jerk and say stop it or get out. So let's just not play. See you folks later. And then that will help put the burden on the other players to be like, man, why you got to be a jerk? Stop it. I mean, if you don't, so like I said, socialization is this process of rubbing off these rough edges from people's personalities and their behaviors. And that's something that it's easier to do when you're, in grade school. Once you're an adult, it becomes like, man, come on. At this point, it's a choice. It's a lifestyle choice. Andrew Winecki, $5. Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed the book. Any chance of returning to an earlier video series? Stay tuned. I don't know if it's gonna be the next video, but it might be. Tom Rollins. Hi, Matt. Hello, Tom. You touched on the responsibilities of a DM. Yes. How do I go about getting my players more involved in the game? Well, I think there's probably a running the game video in there. I believe I have in my notes of future videos like how to hook your players. There's kind of general advice and specific advice. General advice that kind of applies to everybody, but then specific advice that requires you to know the player, depending on a case-by-case basis. But often my experience is dungeon masters tend to want to spend a lot of time on like world building and the details of an adventure that aren't really relevant to the players using their character sheets to fight monsters, which is usually what people want to do when they show up to play D&D. Like Phil did a lot of work on his campaign setting, and it's really it's super cool, but he gave us like a 36-page PDF, and I was like, I don't really want to read a 36-page PDF. I want whatever's in here that's awesome and cool to be relevant to my character, and then I will be interested in it, right? And he does a good job of that. Like his campaign, he's a really good DM. In many ways, he's a better DM than I am. So I think that's the problem, is DMs tend to want to share this stuff, and that's not why the players signed up. Players don't sign up because they want to share in your world. They want to kill monsters. They want to be presented with drama. They want to be presented with drama and tension and reasons to do motivations, reasons to do things. We have to stop this person, otherwise they're going to do this. And they want treasure, they want gold, they want to level up. So you got to put all that in there. And then if you can take your world and you can take the things in it that you think are cool and put them in front of the players and make them relevant to what's happening to them, well, then they're going to get hooked. Arn Van Roland threw me 50 of something. Kroner? Hey, Matt. Hello, Arn. Love the lock, stock, and two smoking barrels. One of my all-time favorite lines of dialogue is I love that movie, and I think that movie gets unfairly labeled as being Tarantino derivative, and I don't think it is. It seems wholly original to me in a synthetic way, if that makes sense. Like Star Wars was original in that it synthesized a bunch of stuff that no one had ever synthesized before, and then did it at a very high level of quality. That's what Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels does, and I don't really see any of Tarantino's influence in there. I see influence from lots of other British TV shows, like, not the Sweeney specifically, but stuff like that, and obviously the Italian Job and Get Carter and all that stuff. And it's brilliant. I love it. But there's one of my favorite quotes from it. I cannot quote here on stream, but it is from that dude. What is the topic today? Well, we just released a video on hot starts, but we can talk about whatever you want. I can say Cool Kid HD, thank you for the thank you for doubling down on Arn's 50 knock, which I still think is Kroner. Norwegian Kroner? Are you from Scandinavia? I bet you are. For some reason, NOK looks like North Korea to me, but that would be very unusual if people were watching my videos in North Korea, especially people named Arn. Arn Van Roland sounds like a character from a Warren Zevon song. So yeah, the two takeaways, and there may be others, but the two takeaways I had looking at the comments, and I do read all the comments. I don't react to all of them. I heart some of them and I thumbs up some of them. But the two takeaways I saw was that a lot of people, I think all independently from one another, a lot of people hit upon the idea of the adventure beginning with the characters on an airship as it's going down and it crashes. I had that idea to start a Dark Sun game, which very recently, before the chain, and I never pulled the trigger on it. I did a bunch of work on it, but I didn't pull the trigger on it. So yeah, that's a very popular idea, and a lot of people have done prison breaks. A ton of people have done those prison breaks where the characters have amnesia, and the thing about it is people say, oh, that's because that's how Elder Scrolls starts, and I think you got the cart before the horse. I think Elder Scrolls does it for the reason that DMs do it, because this is something I saw a lot of in the late 80s and all through the 90s, way before there was any Skyrim or Morrowind or any of that stuff. So it's definitely, I'm sure a handful of people were inspired by that, but it's like crabs. It's like DMs naturally evolve independently. These disparate organisms all just naturally evolve into crabs for some reason. It's a very useful phenotype. Odd Sol Yep. Alex Leon, probably lying. Any news on the chain or MCDM during the pandemic? Well, we're all socially isolating, and I don't think there's no plan to get back together until everybody feels safe doing so. And I think a vaccine existing will help, but it's possible that some people will be, given how politicized like the CDC often is, not just this administration, they're not the only ones that have done this. I lived through the AIDS epidemic, and they did the same thing back then, heavily politicized. I have some friends of mine who don't pay a close attention to the development of the vaccine and who are skeptical that the first one is going to be the best one. And there's reason to be skeptical, but like I follow a lot of different epidemiologists, and I think I would know if there was a real problem with a vaccine. So, but the point is that you don't have to be like a science denier to be like, maybe I don't want to take the first vaccine. Right. And so it may be that there'll be quote unquote a vaccine, but we don't all get it at the same time. And there may be people who are like, I'm going to hold out and wait another couple of months. So we'll see. I definitely think we'll come back in 2021. I just don't know when. Yeah. Wanderer of Weapons. Thank you for the $10. Thoughts on the concept of video games that take inspiration from video games? I think take your inspiration from wherever. You know, lots of cool stuff in video games you can stick in. And a lot of video games are inspired by tabletop RPGs in the first place. So I see no problem with that. One of the big criticisms of 4th edition was it was too much like an MMO or whatever, but I think it was just fun. And it was the only version of D&D that was self-evidently a game, right? The language wasn't it was the only edition of D&D that didn't use natural language to describe the rules, which puts the rules and the world together in a way that makes it seem like these rules are describing a world rather than a game. 4th edition didn't do that. It said, no, these rules describe a game. And some people didn't like that, but yeah, there's lots of stuff that I've stolen from video games, boss fights, you know, the scripted behavior of bosses, action-oriented monsters kind of gets into that a little bit. I have no problem with that. Wherever we take inspiration from. And in fact, in my experience, you know, if players can recognize something, oh, this is like, you know, a boss fight in whatever, Zelda, which I've never played, then it helps them understand what's going on. It helps them contextualize what they're seeing, you know, and sometimes it works the opposite way. Sometimes, like, I've had lots of players who they want to play a rogue, and the only basis they have for how a rogue should behave is World of Warcraft. And then they get frustrated when the rogue in D&D doesn't behave that way. That's fair, right? How are they to know? How are they to know that this one fantasy RPG they've played how are they to know which things in that game are archetypal and you can expect to see basically in every fantasy RPG, and how many of them are unique and idiosyncratic? How would you know? No way to know. And in fact, you end up having to take like a monk / rogue in order to get there. So it goes both ways, but I steal from video game the kind of, you know, set pieces that I see in video games all the time. My players love it. I've never had a player complain about that. Have I ever run a game in the University of Capital? Thank you for the $5. Hidden Q. Yeah. I ran several sessions, 4 or 6 sessions at the Imperial College of Statescraft because Lord Kenway of Dalrath was sent there by his dad, because his dad was the Baron of Dalrath. And so he was the scion of a rich family, a barbaric family. His father, you know, carved this barony out of the wilderness and was having to fight to keep it against elves and orcs and barbaric humans, and wanted his son to be like an actual educated diplomat, a statesperson. And so sent him to this college, and it was just a one-on-one. And it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of soap opera, drama, you know, secret societies, falling in love, rivals in love, stuff like that. That was a lot. It was really cool. It was a lot of fun. You know, what I did was I tied, I had the player each semester or each year of school. So yeah, each year of school was a skill challenge with multiple roles, but I didn't have them make them all at once. I would have them say, okay, here's the first semester, go ahead and see how well you do, right? And here's the subject, and I would write a little thing about what the subject of this semester was in this class. I would feature it, and that would lead to the player wanting to do research on that subject and stuff, and role playing would determine how well the role was. But then between the different roles, I would have kind of, you know, Professor Xavier's School of Gifted Youngsters type stuff happen, adventures with encounters happen between these, right? And that made it feel like they're going to school, because obviously going to school isn't just sitting down and studying and then making a roll. At the end, you're living your life, and some of the greatest adventures we have in our lives happen while we're at school. So why not? Hugo 50 MXs, 50 Max. I think a hot start's great for a new group. A goblin ambush allows you to explain the rules practically on the table. Well, yeah, I agree, but like keep in mind that like you're in a tavern and you hang out for a while, and then something exterior happens to threaten you. I don't think that's a hot start. I think that's just a regular everyday start, right? You know, we're here in this quote unquote safe space. To me, a hot start would be like that kind of hot start would be, here's the tavern, put your characters where you want to be, and then I put a bunch of goblins out there and you don't even have a chance to talk. Like it's just roll initiative. It's the first thing that happens, and you might even even a hotter start would be you're in the middle of the battle. Stuff has already happened. That would be crazy, but that would be a hot start. But you always want, if you start in a tavern, you always, and I think they said this in the tavern video, is the blah blah has to stop at some point, and there has to be some kind of tension has to show up. A guy with a gun has to walk in. Joseph Roloma, 500 Filipino pesos. Or just 500 PHP script. Oh, look, you even said that. Oh, awesome. It's like reading a Magic the Gathering card. If I just kept reading to the end of the sentence, we would have not had to argue for the past 45 minutes because the answer to my question is the next thing. Which books should you read for Dune? I don't know. Like, read whichever ones. I recommend reading that first one, Dune, and see what you think. And then after that, it's up to you. No point in reading the other ones if you don't like. I don't recommend reading them out of order. That's what you're asking. Although I've read a lot of series out of order and it didn't bother me. Sometimes that's the best way, I think. Alec Ramsden. How do I, as a DM, deal with a player that likes to nitpick the details I describe in plot holes? You just say, man, like you can let it be known that this is exasperating. Right. And that, again, there's a misalignment, that the type of details and the type of the way you're running is maybe not in accord with the way they're playing. And of those two things, and you have control over the way you could be like, well, if this bothers you, if the way I'm running D&D bothers you, we don't have to play. You have the ultimate veto power. You can't be afraid to use it. And that's that kind of attitude of like poking holes in the DM's explanations. That's for one thing, as when you first start DMing, you don't really know which details are going to bite you in the ass. And I can't even describe, this is something you learn over 30 years. You learn sort of like, I remember always having problems with imagining 3D spaces like taverns and where the stairs are and stuff. And I would often have I would give contradictory descriptions just because in my head I couldn't really picture it. I'm like, I know there's a way up. I just don't know. So why can't it be here? It's like, well, it can't be there because then how do you get to this point? I'm like, oh shit, I don't know, man. And so over the years, I've learned how to dial in my level of description, my level of detail to a point where I don't bother describing things more detailed than this because I'm going to get it wrong. And then people are going to poke holes in it. So it's natural. That's a natural behavior. But at the end of the day, just say, listen, is this what you're here for? Is this why you're here? Because I'm doing my best on this side. There's no way to solve these problems without confrontation. I think what people are asking for is they're asking for a magic bullet that allows them to solve problem players without confronting them. And I don't think there's a way to do it. Payday 1888. Hey, thank you. Thank you for the $20. And I hope your friends appreciate you as a dungeon master. Cameron Phillips, $5. How do I get my players back on track when they're completely lost? Without making them feel like they're lost? Well, I mean, what's more important, them having fun or them being self-directed? Because being maximally self-directed rarely leads to fun. It often leads in the players being lost in the reads and not being able to find or hold on to a plot thread. So at the end of the day, by all means, just say, guys, have an NPC come in, have orcs attack and kind of push them in the right direction. Sorry. So if they're lost, they probably know they're lost. So what they want is they want you to help them. So do it by whatever means necessary, including pulling the fourth wall, looking at the camera and saying, guys, this is the adventure. It's over here. If you want to play tonight, then you need to I find often players, if they're lost, they get exasperated and they want direction. Luke Fredericks, $5, thank you. Have I played Baldur's Gate 3? No, it's in early access, and I'll wait for it to come out and probably check it out. Lars has played the early access thing, the whole thing, and he really liked it. So that inspired me. But generally speaking, I find that CRPGs tend to mistake quality of writing for a quantity of it, and they just spam pages and pages of lore before you get started, and I don't find that. Like, look, I just did a video about a hot start, right? I don't want to sit here and read page after page of just proper nouns that I've never heard of and don't care about. I want to meet people and go to cool places and fight monsters. It's easy. So we'll see. Matt Potts, thank you for the $10. Gonna be splitting my group into 4 side quests. That seems cool. As per your downtime video, but I don't yet know what their goals are. Oh, that's a problem. Tips on prepping: go find some adventures. That's what I do. I go find some short adventures that are of the appropriate level, including, like, the shorter the better, right? Because if it's just if it's just for the downtime stuff, a single encounter can be enough. A single encounter. Start there. Start with, here I got 4 players, four different encounters that have a bad guy who's trying to do something that's relevant to your world. Matty Barnes, €5. Have I considered making more D&D history videos? Yes. No spoilers. Carlo Marazzian. Carlo, hello. How do I even measure how successful a video is? There's a lot of different metrics. Like the Dune videos don't get a lot of views compared to the other videos, but they get seen places my other videos don't get seen, right? And so that helps build the audience. So that's one way of judging success, and I know that when I go into it. I don't make a Dune video thinking, oh, this is going to end up on the front page of Reddit or whatever. But then otherwise, it's how many views do they get in the first hour, 2 hours? How many comments do they get? How are people on the net? It's pretty basic stuff. How long do people watch? Here's a 16-minute video. There's a popular, I think it's a myth, I don't know. There's popular wisdom that YouTubers work to make their videos 10 minutes long because there's some algorithm that tells them that. I've never had YouTube tell me anything like that. I've never had YouTube. YouTube does a lot to put analytics in front of you and give you advice on what to do. Like, hey, your videos seem to do better when they're, you know, when you publish them at this time of the day or whatever. Actually, that they don't say it. They say, like, the kind of analytics you get is stuff like, this video is doing better than your normal videos and it's being seen more by non-subscribers. It'll say stuff like that. That's it. So I've never had YouTube ever tell me anything about the length of videos being good or bad. Every video I've made has been as long as I thought it needed to be. So to me, when I look at, like, the watch length, I always look at on average, people are watching 10 minutes of this 16-minute video. That's really fucking good. That means that probably a lot of people are watching the whole thing, and then a few people are watching a minute or two and then checking out, pulling the ripcord. Because I think it would be actually unusual for most people to get 2/3 of the way through the video and then stop. So yeah, I judge success based on how many views does it get in the first couple of hours? How is it viewed outside of the YouTube ecology? Do people on Facebook or Reddit or Twitter share it and talk about it? And then how many comments does it get? And then also, you know, what are those comments? I read all the comments. So sitting there going, you know, when a whole bunch of people say, oh my God, this is exactly the video I needed right now, thank you, then I feel like, okay, I'm doing well. Because it's often the case that I make a video and I'm not sure how useful it will be. I'm like, are there a lot of people having this problem? I don't know. Let's see. Let's find out. And I make the video and the people are like, oh, this is exactly what I needed to hear. That makes me happy. Nicholas Hammond, $10. I've marathoned the Running the Game series for the last week. Awesome. Awesome. That makes me super happy. I hope your players appreciate, Nicholas, how lucky they are to have you as a dungeon master. And I hope that they eventually become dungeon masters so that you get to have fun, because that's important too. Tomo, £10. Crikey. How do I feel about the OSR genre? I don't know a lot about it. I've got a bunch of OSR games, but I've never bought one. I know a little bit about it. The old school Renaissance and designers learning how to design by hacking old editions of D&D. Sounds good to me. Matthew just threw me €5. Thanks, Matt. Joe Auerbach, I recognize your name. $20, no question, no answer. I like the prison break call out. Awesome. I've been in games like that. Since it seems like the DM's assuming that making something hard is the same as, making something hard for the players is making it hard for the characters. Yeah. You know, there's lots of, I think there is a appropriate, I have, over the years, I have learned that when I put a really difficult challenge in front of my players, and I don't mean combat, I mean a puzzle. And a puzzle, I don't mean puzzles as in, you know, like a Rubik's Cube. I mean puzzles as in, how do we proceed? How do we unlock the next part of this adventure? If the players have all of the clues, and I've heard them in debate and discussion assemble the correct answer, which almost always happens, and then they discard it, then I have no sympathy for them. I'm gonna say, this puzzle is not too hard. This puzzle, figuring out what you need to do to get this guy to help you, which is usually what we're talking about, is not that hard, because I know, I don't say this to the players, but I know it's not that hard because I literally have heard them say, well, what if we did this, that, and the other thing? No, that's stupid. I'm like, no, you figured it out. Now it's obviously not that hard because you literally figured it out. You just didn't believe in your answer. And then I just kind of double down and I let them be frustrated, because as difficult as this is to hear, the reality is that sometimes in order to have that aha moment where the players really feel like they solved something, the way you get there is you climb this hill of frustration where you want something, but you don't have all the answers and you're accumulating answers and putting connections together. That process can be frustrating. I've had many players who are used to video games where it's literally just, which button do I press? Which of these 4 answers is the right one? They get really frustrated that they have to present a moral argument to this person like they are a real person. There's not a phrase you can say. There's not some plot coupon that you've collected that you can present there and it's instantly just going to turn them from, that's a video game. No, this is a person. And you need to appeal to their humanity, logos, ethos, the other one, pathos. Pick one, right? Players get frustrated and they don't like that. So that's part of the problem, is that we players don't like getting frustrated, but sometimes getting frustrated is necessary to get to that we got it moment. And you as a dungeon master need to know when they're just going in circles with, they're actually making progress and they don't realize it. And that's listening to the players, which is a skill. It's a skill, but you will pick it up. I don't think it's really possible to run D. Well, maybe it is actually. I could be wrong. It wasn't possible for me to run D&D for 30 years without learning how to listen to all the people at the table and gauge their when they're frustrated and when they're interested and when they're actually like I remember, like, you folks saw the Chain episode, which was kind of a little bit of a when they went into the Underdark. Sorry. One of these days I'm going to mount that camera to the wall and it'll stop shaking. When they went into the Underdark, and it was a little bit of a funhouse dungeon because they were in the mind world of a mad aboleth, sort of like a mad aboleth demigod almost. And so they were dealing with all these puzzles. And I thought there were a couple of players that I knew would be hooked on this. I knew they would really like this. But then there were a couple of players that I thought might get frustrated that they weren't able to use their character abilities to solve these problems, that they were going to actually have to think. But when I watched, and I was sensitive to this, and I watched, and one of those players seemed to kind of sit back, who's normally not a sit back kind of player. This player sat back, I noticed that, but then the first puzzle, someone solved, and then the second puzzle, someone solved, and I think seeing that those 2 puzzles got solved, they engaged with the third one. And so it worked. It can work. Psycho, $5, thank you. Hi, man. Is it okay that I didn't want to include a player in my game that I didn't know? Absolutely. You shouldn't, like, look... It's like, you know, it's like a lot of bands start off when they're teenagers and it's just the people in the garage and they're a band now. And then 3 years later when they're gigging, they got to kick out 1 or 2 of these people because those people aren't, you know, John Anderson, lead singer of Yes, said it's like, it's a bus and the bus makes stops and some people get on and some people get off. And, it's all a question of who do you feel comfortable running for. I have run games for people, coworkers, who it's not that I didn't like them, it's that I didn't know them. They just knew that I was the local dungeon master and they really wanted to play D&D and they lobbied really hard until I said yes. And that has not yet ever really worked. I much prefer to identify the people I want to play with and then invite them. Matt, I had the first session, said Darageth. Wait, you're a mod. So this is from somebody whose name I don't know. Matt, I had the first session of my first campaign just before I post a hot start. I fear I've left the players overwhelmed with choice. That's the same problem I had with the Chain of Acheron. We'll probably do a video on this soon. I kind of want to go back to the chain and take some of the lessons I learned that I put in the campaign diaries and try turning them into running the game videos, because that's what I should have done in the first place instead of doing campaign diaries. And one of the takeaways from the Chain of Acheron was definitely that I wanted the players when they arrived in Capital to feel like this was a big complex political situation and they were outsiders, but I let that drag on way too long. I expected them to quote unquote make stuff happen, but that was a mistake. I should have picked one of the great houses and said this out. Now that you guys have soaked in this world for 1 or 2 sessions, maybe 3 sessions, so that it seems real and complex and you're feeling a little lost at sea and you don't know which house you should ally with, if any, I should have picked one house and made them the bad guys. But I designed these houses so that none of them would be bad guys. And so I felt weird doing that, but I should have done that. So the players go, aha, now our choices, our nearly infinite choices have narrowed in a satisfying way. That was a big lesson, big takeaway. So you gotta take some of those choices and narrow them down for the players. Make making choices easier, because there used to be a time for only like 2 years when TED Talks were amazing, like real experts in the field sharing world-changing data with you, as opposed to just like, I don't know, like pep talks or whatever they became, like, you know, those like Tony Robbins, those people you pay money to and they take your money and they tell you you're going to be awesome. But one of these guys shared a bunch of research about how we don't really like having a lot of choice. Human beings like knowing what's expected of them. And when you give them more choice, if you ask them, do you want more choices or fewer choices? They will always say, I want more choices. But then when you give them more choices, they are measurably unhappy in repeatable ways. You can do study after study and learn that when you give people many choices, they don't like it. They are less happy. They want to know what is expected of me. What is the problem I need to try to solve? Not, here's several different problems, choose one and you don't know which one's right. And no, I don't do that. So I think there's a time and a place for choice, and then there's a time and a place for railroading. Remember, people use railroading pejoratively, but roller coasters are on rails and people seem to enjoy those. Justin says, $5, thank you. I appreciate all your running the game videos. Thank you. That makes me happy. I recently got feedback from a player about a mentor NPC. I'm excited to work on it with your video. Good. That makes me happy. Viking Madness, £5. I'm doing my own campaign. Good, as you should. And everyone is playing as dragons. Cool. There was been a couple of D&D supplements about that, I think. Have I ever done something like that? No, I've had players that played half dragons. Certainly not. I don't mean like Dragonborn. I mean like a half dragon. But no, I think monstrous players, the most monstrous players anybody has ever played in my world is like dark elves, bugbears, stuff like that. Legend of Zia, 10 Canadian buckaroonies. What would I think of some kind of advanced crafting system for alchemy and enchanting that involves parts of monsters? I love that. And we put a little bit of that in Strongholds and Followers, but it was a polished, kind of dressed up system that my friends and I had been using since the 80s, and it shows. So I would like to do something like that again, but I'm sure there's stuff on the DM's Guild for that. I would assume that there's lots of harvesting monster bits. Oh, I would love to see an Arcadia article where here's 10 spells, or maybe it's not, maybe here's like 10 unique spell components, like a griffin feather. And if you use this griffin feather as the component in this spell or this spell, like Featherfall or this, then it gives you an extra bonus to that spell. I think that would be fucking amazing. So yeah, I love that stuff. But that's all down to the kind of game you run. I think that there is a difference between the way people want to play D&D and the options that Wizards of the Coast is presenting them. I think Wizards of the Coast tends to present very kind of save the world adventures, more Lord of the Rings than The Hobbit. I'm not making a declarative statement. It's a tendency. Not all adventures that they published are like this, but I think that like there's a lot to be said for I want to level up. I want to get new cool abilities. I want to face bigger challenges. I want to get more notoriety. I want more cash. I want more things to spend on my cash. I want a really detailed world that has a lot of cool stuff I can do in it, and like really noodly crafting and stuff like that can be a part of that. I'm inspired by The Mandalorian. Alex, awesome. How would I use a bounty hunter devil? I don't even know what that is as a villain tracking on the party. Well, you got to set that up. Bounty hunters chasing the party are totally awesome. Like that is a super awesome, super dramatic thing. But there's a couple. First of all, you need to make an action-oriented villain, because when they fight, this guy needs to be able to get out of town, because you don't want to be Darth Maul. Like, one of the biggest mistakes George Lucas made was killing Darth Maul in that first movie, when he should have been the foil to Obi-Wan Kenobi. So you don't want to do that. So the first thing is you need a bounty hunter who's dope and powerful enough that he can fight the heroes and survive and get away to fight another day, which action-oriented design helps with a lot. But then you need the players. Somebody needs to put a bounty on them, so they need to do something, probably inadvertently, as part of some other unrelated adventure. They need to do something that causes somebody, either a duke or a crime lord, a good guy or a bad guy, to put a price on their heads. Probably a bad guy. Somebody like Jabba the Hutt puts a price on their head. You foiled, so you need a villain, probably a villain they're going to face when they're much higher level. That villain, actually, this is the plot of my series of novels. You need somebody like the Bishop, you need somebody like Garth, and then you need somebody like the Count, right? And so the players meet Garth and they think he's the bad guy, lieutenant, but actually he's the bad guy's boss's lieutenant, right? And so, yeah, you need an adventure where there was a scheme that the Jabba the Hutt character had that was underway. The players thwart that scheme, so they piss off Jabba the Hutt, and now Boba Fett's after them. Boba Fett, where? Stephen Collins, you were great in Star Trek: The Motion Picture. Hey, Matt, hello. Lesson planning as a secondary ELA English language, secondary ESL teacher. Other than Dune, what novel would I teach to 14, 17-year-olds? Oh, goodness. Well, I don't know any 14 to 17-year-olds. So there are ways in which there's a way in which every generation of teenager is unique, and there are ways in which every generation of teenager is exactly the same. But not hanging out with a lot of 14 to 17-year-olds, it would be presumptuous of me to imagine I knew which was which. I read Dune when I was a teenager. I don't know, like, all of my answers would be answers from like the 1980s, right? And the weird thing about the 1980s was that almost all the fantasy and science fiction we were reading was old. It was like 10 years old, if not older. So I don't think that's true anymore. I think nowadays when you go to the bookstore, it's mostly stuff that's been published in the last year or whatever. There's not as much evergreen stuff there, I think. I don't know. Probably I would go with stuff like comic books. I would go with stuff like Lock and Key, right? Or something from Jeff Lemire. I don't know. I would need to know the 14 to 17-year-olds. I don't even recommend Dune to everybody. Dune's a very weird book. It's just one I love. I talk about Dune because I love it, not because I think you'll love it. No, I think it's very likely that any Lord of the Rings, Dune, you're going to bounce off it. Matthew Schallenberger. As a DM, how do I dig myself out of a confusing plot? I try to make it less confusing. Try to find out, why is this confusing? It's too complex. It takes a lot of work as a writer. Writers learn over time. You're not born with this instinct, but you will learn it over time. And it takes years of writing all the time, and designing adventures counts. It's just as important as writing scenes for novels or screenplays or whatever it is you're doing, video games. But writers learn over time to use all the parts of the buffalo, right? They want to harvest everything from the buffalo. They want the meat and the heart and the bone. Now crack the bone, get the marrow out. We're going to use the bones for weapons or tools and stuff. You want to use all the parts of the buffalo. So what you start doing is your plots and stories become less and less complex over time, because you learn, oh, wait a minute, I can use this character to do this thing instead of creating a new character for this. And that's one of the ways your plots become less complex. But at the end of the day, how many movies have you loved? But if somebody asked you what the plot of the movie was, you'd be like, oh man, I don't know. Like, you mean like literally what happens? And you remember certain scenes and lines of dialogue and moments. You remember action sequences or characters. I remember that moment when they fell in love and like, well, can you tell me what happened right before that? Like, I don't remember. So plot, I think, is overrated. A friend of mine who's a lead writer, I think they probably call it a narrative director these days, but he's a lead writer, who gave a talk at GDC and said, stop worrying about plot. Nobody cares. Focus on characters. Completely correct. 100% correct. This is a guy who's been a lead writer at huge companies on major video games, and he's completely correct. A lot of plots are complex, like a lot of pulp serial plotting is out of the frying pan into the fire, and by episode 8 or 9 you forget what the hell, why are we doing. It's like that's pretty typical of the genre. I wouldn't fight too much against that. Cool Kid HD, Norwegian Kroner, I got it right. Wow, I'm way behind on chat. Trey, so I'm gonna go back. Imran, $10. Imran Psych? That can't be right. Psych? Is there a thing in the middle of it? Any suggestions for running an election in a D&D 5 campaign? That seems pretty out of genre to me. I'm a big fan of a game called Star Citizen, and they had an election in game, and the thing I didn't like about it was how transparent it was, modeled after our modern elections. I don't necessarily mean this election. I just mean, oh, there's 2 candidates. They slag each other off in very typical ways, and I'm like, this is science. You're creating an original science fiction universe from scratch. Give me something interesting. Don't just give me a boiled down version of. But in a medieval game, they didn't have elections. That's not a modern idea, really. So I don't know what I would do. I would probably look to kind of that Blackadder 3 era, which the era of like Pitt the Younger, where they did have elections, obviously. Maybe watch House of Cards, the original, and get ideas, because the thing about elections is that they bring out politics and dirty dealing and all, people want to win. People want to win for lots of different reasons, good reasons and bad reasons. So I'm not sure I have any advice for you, but certainly you can do an election in an RPG, but I don't know if I would do one in a 5e game. There is a democracy, a legit democracy in Orden, but they keep it a secret. How many plot hooks do I say is a good number to start off with for a sandbox style game? I would say at least 3. It's a lot of work. But you can find short adventures. You can find really short adventures and then just kind of skim them and go, okay, this is one where someone stole a golden chalice from this temple. Okay, that's one. That's easy. I'll just keep that in my head. And you only need 1 or 2 encounters for that session when the players pick which adventure they want to do. And then between that session and the next session, you can read the rest of the adventure. Ron Fraser loves my D&D content. I love yours, Ron. Thank you for the $5. Rulidos, I say hello to you, Rulidos. Thank you for the $5. Joseph Roloma, I remember you. In relation to choice, if I thought about doing more vids on running the games on rails and balancing, I did actually yesterday start I have a list of potential videos, and I added a new one, which is choice. Just using examples of when I've given the players too many choices, what's the right number of choices, and basically this theme of, is my conversion for Night Below. I never really converted Night Below. Frederick Boderman. I never really converted it. I just stole parts of, I took Night Below, threw out bits I didn't like, and I grabbed pieces of other adventures and stuck them in. So that's not even, I don't even think that's written down anywhere. Any advice for co-hosting a live stream on Zoom, asks Tony Garrity. Introducing guests, I think I might have got that name wrong. I like trying to pronounce people's names in as authentic as way. It was Chilean, by the way, with Matthias Kylan. I had a friend of mine, really good programmer, who was from Scandinavia. I think he was from Sweden. I remember having a long discussion with the other designers about American foreign policy. This was during the second Iraq War, and I was being incredibly critical of our foreign policy, but also, I don't think there's no good use for an army and for a superpower, but I think the uses that we tend to put it to tend to be overwhelmingly bad. And he popped his head up and he was like, "You should move to Sweden, man. I think that your political viewpoint would settle in very neatly there." And his last name was Kylen. And I walked up to him and I said, "Mr. Kylen, how do you?" And he gave me a look and he's like, "Oh, no, that's fine. Go ahead." And I went, "Wait, what?" He goes, "That's not how you pronounce my name." I'm like, this seems like a pretty straightforward. It's not a name I'm used to as an Anglo, but it's but I thought I got it. He goes, "No, nobody gets it right." I'm like, "No, now I really want to get it right." That's the kind of person I am. He goes, "It's pronounced Chilean." And I was like, "What?" You know, it's a K at the beginning, right? And he goes, I'm just telling you, that's how it's pronounced. And so I actually went back and forth with him until maybe he just humored me, but he said, yeah, you got it right. But now it's been almost 20 years since then, so I'm probably getting it wrong again. Any advice for hosting a live stream on an event on Zoom? None. I'm not a great host for a live stream in person. Ask good questions. Let your people answer. I don't know. I apologize for letting you down. 25 euros. Piggy Palooza. I appreciate your work, Piggy. Started reading Dune and got your friends into D&D. The system works. I don't like telling people what to read or what to listen to or what to watch, because I don't know you, and I think those recommendations should be personal, and I think you should find your own way. But I do like sharing. I don't have a problem talking about something like Dune or 2001, two of the most popular works of art ever in history, right? So I don't have a problem sharing those things and talking about that stuff, and it makes me happy to think that there are people out there who are getting into Dune. And you know, I guarantee you there are people who think, well, Matt likes Dune because Matt's old and Dune is old, but Dune was already it was 20 years old by the time I read it. So it's not like Dune came out and I got excited and read it. Nope. It came out before I was born. So I love the idea that there is a culture. There's a rush to throw out everything that's old. Every revolution does this, and every revolution goes to different lengths to it. And I definitely think we have lots of real world examples where the revolution threw out everything before day zero, and that never goes well. That is super bad. Maybe the French Revolution, but they didn't throw out everything. By no means did they throw out everything. So yeah, I'm not a fan of just systematically going through everything that's more than 15 years old and saying that it's problematic. Yeah, lots of things that are old are problematic, but that doesn't mean we can't still appreciate them. And I like the idea that there is culture, which is that thing that is passed on, and that new people are coming to Dune and new people are coming to D&D. Advice to get buy-in from audience players. Well, Caleb 333, half of 666. Advice to getting buy-in from players. It helps if you know what kind of stuff they're into. You know, why are they your friends in the first place? What do you guys have in common? Like, I had a good friend of mine who I still haven't run D&D for, but I would love to. He's a dad now, so it's probably not going to have a lot of time, but you never know. Who told me that not Empire of the Sun, Tears of the Sun. It's a very different movie. Tears of the Sun was one of his favorite movies. And talking to him about his movies and things that he liked, I discovered that one of his favorite things was watching drama, movies about people who are hyper competent under enormous pressure, and the fantasy of being like not just a Navy SEAL, but like a Navy SEAL commander, right? And I was like, oh, is that what you like? Oh, I got an idea. And I wrote a whole adventure. I've never pulled the trigger on it. I would really like to. That is basically Tears of the Sun. So it's important that you know what your players like. Why are you friends? What kind of stuff do they read? What does that have in common? This is work that I think most people don't do in their daily lives. But that's part of it. And also just giving them choice. That's what the pitching your campaign video was about. Here's a bunch of different choices. And each of these choices has different sliders for how much role playing is there going to be, how much politics, how much combat, how lethal is it, right? Will there be romance, stuff like that. And then see if you give them options and then they can pick, well, now, but what more can you do? James Robards homebrewed a Demon Hunter and Death Knights. Hoping they're not broken. Don't worry about that. They'll get less broken over time as you run them. Jessica DeShazer, $5. Thank you for your videos. Thank you for $5. I have now only played in 2 one-shots and DM'd 3 games of my own. I couldn't have done it without me. Well, that's not true. You absolutely could have done it without me. You just didn't know you couldn't have done it without me. Hopefully it remains a hobby of yours, because the more I put into D&D, the more it rewarded me. I mean, come on. Jason Terry, $20. Thank you. Hey, Matt. Thank you for all the amazing content. Thank you. Thank you for hanging out. Thank you for being here. How do I feel about paid games? I don't really know anything about like being a paid dungeon master. I don't know. I've never done it, and I would feel weird doing it, but that doesn't mean other people can't do it. It's something I don't really know about. It's an ecology that I don't have any insight into. And for me, D&D is too much work to do it for money. If that makes sense. Hard to say. Like, if I felt like I was obligated to do it because people were paying me, it would really kill a lot of my passion for it. Look at that, Hanko TM, trademark, $20. The thing I wanted to happen, happened. One of my players stepped up to DM. That makes me super happy. He's a better DM than I ever was. Well, now you just got to step up. I definitely, one of the reasons I love playing is I love seeing how other, like when Phil runs, it inspires me to run because he's a better DM than me. His sliders, if there's a 10 band graphic equalizer, there's 2 or 3 things I think I'm better than Phil at, but there's 2 or 3 things he's way better than me at. And seeing him running and being in his game makes me want to do those things more. So definitely it'll inspire you. Rob, thank you for the $20, Rob. John, $10, thank you. Thanks for all the great advice over the years. Well, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for being here. Thank you for the $10 Roonies. What are some of my favorite classes to play? I love all classes. I don't really have any interest in things like the Artificer because I'm like, whatever with that. But like, I look at the player's handbook and I'm like, any of these could be really fucking cool. It would be very easy for me to make characters that I enjoyed with all of them. Ken and Brown, on your 3rd time through running the game. Wow. 2nd time through the chain. Holy moly. Holy moly. Super helpful, educational, and engaging. What's the video I'm most proud of? Maybe the role-playing video on playing evil characters. And the role-playing video are probably, and the politics series. There's a couple of videos in the politics series that I think are just amazing that I rewatch. I rewatch them and I'm engaged by them. This is one of the ways I am a creator is I watch my own stuff back and I'm critical of it, but I'm also engaged by stuff. And that's how I learn what's working. It's one of the reasons I don't think the Chain of Acheron makes a good product. It makes a good example. It makes a very successful example, but it's not a good product because it's not something I would watch. I don't rewatch the Chain, but the role-playing video, playing evil characters, both have a lot of philosophy in them, and both are really, I think, if you're ready for one of those videos, they can be overwhelming because there's a lot going on in them. But if you're ready for those videos, then they are very impactful, and I enjoy watching them back, and I'm really proud of them. €5 from Philip Castinger. Is there a local shop that I play D&D at any time, or was I always? No, I never played D&D in game stores. It was always home groups and friends, nerds that I met growing up. That was not easy back when I was a kid. Nerd culture was not mainstream by any stretch of the imagination. If people thought you knew who Wolverine was, you'd get beaten up. But I have played at conventions, which is not entirely unlike playing. I've played and run at conventions. Ken and Brown, on your 3rd. Oh, you already said that. Sorry. Okay. Eden Yankovic Sumar. I think I got that. DKK. Deutsch? No. Dutch? No. Democratic? Hey, Matt, hello. Prepping my next Roll20 campaign, A+. I've been a great inspiration. No, you're an inspiration to me because you're doing the job right now. The campaign will be maritime and the main villains will be an aberration cult. That sounds good to me. I'm sure I would like playing that game. Sander F90, Strongholds and Followers Keep Management has become the core of your game. I'm looking forward to revising that. Thank you for the €5. I'm looking forward to revising Strongholds and Followers. I don't know when that's going to happen. No promises. But I'm glad you're getting some value out of it. Leventros. I know Leventros. Leventros Ormus. Maybe this is a different Leventros. £20, $20. I started a game with Trek Across the Plane of Fear in the Siege of Kashyyyk. That's awesome. Any advice on where to go from there? I don't know. Sounds like they need to go after, if they haven't already taken out, if they have their own if they've beaten Peloton and taken the castle, well, now maybe something like redoing Red Hand of Doom and making it so it's their castle. I don't know. There's lots of stuff you can do. It depends. Like go. I mean, as far as adventures, I don't know. It's not a satisfactory answer, but what excites you? Can't wait to get your hands on Kingdoms of Warfare, says Mr. Pac-Man. €10, thank you. We just did a big revision to make organizations more easier, more straightforward to run. I went a little bit too far in one direction, where if you look at the Thieves Guild on the Kickstarter update, it says here are their powers, here are their schemes, which help you in intrigue, and here are their stratagems with effect, which help you in war. But that was too much. It's just here are your powers, here are your actions. Every enemy domain gets 4, every hero domain gets 4 special actions they can do during intrigue, period. Some of these help you raise units, some of these help you with bonus actions or skill checks and stuff like that, but some of them, battle magic, but there's just 4 actions. Some are bonus actions, some are reactions. That's it. And that makes everything so much easier, more straightforward. And as soon as we hit upon that, I was like, oh, this is the final piece slotting into place. And I got really excited. Ben Bradbury, 10 Canadian ducks. From a D to a B+. I think my campaigns are about a B+, so you're doing about as well as me, Ben Bradbury. Awesome. That makes me happy. Christian Martinez. Which region of origin would I be most interested in running a campaign in that I haven't? Definitely Kamara. I've got an adventure. Actually, the Tears of the Sun adventure is a bunch of Kamaran players who are like super, well, I would say super high level, like 13th to 15th level special operatives. And the name of their organ, they're a SAS type, you know, they're a combat applications group style organization that work for the Pharaoh, named the Shadow on the Surface of the Sun is what they're called. And the agents are called Shadow 1, Shadow 2, Shadow 3. And they're all rogue types, but that could be rogue sorcerer, rogue ranger, you know, assassin, infiltrators. And that was the Tears of the Sun eventually. So definitely Kamara, and also Higara. But Higara, I love fantasy Japan. I love that stuff. Huge fan of L5R. Would definitely love to have my own one of those in my pocket, with the right author working on it, not me probably. But also Ix, I love Mesoamerica. I've read a lot of nonfiction about Mayans and Aztecs, and even modern stuff like breaking the Maya code, which is really interesting, about the Mayan language and what we learned about it and what happened to it, and the fact that people still speak it, but for years they didn't have the alphabet for it. So I would love to set a game on the big island of Ix, right? Because the people outside of Ix, it's kind of like Wakanda. People outside of it think that these are a bunch of like kind of Stone Age savages, but that's not true. They're not. They have an advanced civilization there. So hope that's a useful answer. Can't wait for Arcadia. Cannot wait to show it with you. Just saw some mock-up. The funny thing is we got covers done for issues 2 and 3 really easily, and then it took a long time to get a cover for issue number 1. But we just saw a bunch of roughs for the cover of issue 1, and it's going to be super fucking cool. Really excited to share it with you. Is D&D 5 the only RPG? No. No, good friend of mine, my friend Zach, who's played D&D with me before. He was the guy that turned into a spider and explored Castle Ren as a druid. My good friend Zach is running Original Traveler for his friends. I mean, he's a millennial. And the fact that he's like super, super into Original Traveler just warms the cockles of my heart. I'm thinking about having my cockles removed, but that's expensive surgery. So, yeah, there's lots of other RPGs. And in fact, we'll start what I'd like to do is I'd like to do a series about featuring other role-playing games, but I'd like it to be me introducing someone else who pitches that game. And I don't know if it should be just somebody who's a big fan of this game and has a YouTube channel, if that exists and is used to presenting to camera, or if it should be the makers of that game and it's them pitching their game to us. I don't know which would be a good idea. But I don't think I'm the right person to do it, because I haven't played a lot. Like, the games that I've played and know well enough to pitch are all old. They're all super old. So yeah, there are lots of other games. Jordan, it's not Guffrey, is it? Because it looks like Guif, but it can't be right. Jordan, $20, thank you. Would I please give you a piece of lore to add in? I don't know. I think your lore would be better. I think your lore would be better than anything I gave you. But I encourage you to steal from any of the stuff I've mentioned on any of my videos. Rylan Parlow, $10. I made some wounding rules. That sounds cool. While it was cinematic, I thought it slowed things down. Well, there's nothing wrong with slowing things down for some kind of set piece battle. Remember the battle between Nicodemus and the Troll Chieftain? That definitely was a lot slower than normal battle, but the fact we were all we did was had a one-on-one while everybody else watched, and they just re-rolled initiative at the end of every round. That was all it took to really ratchet up the tension, and suddenly it felt like single combat. But there's nothing wrong with it as long as you're deploying those wounding rules in the right scenario. A gladiator fight makes sense to me, but you shouldn't do that for all of them, I don't think. Have I considered running the chain over Fantasy Grounds? Oh yeah, absolutely I did, but I decided against it because I didn't think... We talked about it, and I was never really able to get people to be excited by it. Remember that the people in the chain of Akron, only like 2 of them are employees of MCDM. And they're not even really at the table because, I mean, it's up to, maybe they're at the table because they're employees, but originally they weren't. They were at the table because they were my friends and we liked playing D&D together. So if we're all going to get together online and do something, like that group of people never gets together online to do anything. We play Rocket League, we play Star Citizen, they play Among Us, and in none of these instances is it that group of people. It's always one or two people from that group and one or two people who aren't in that group. So no, there's no interest in that group of people because they all have very different lives. They're all, Phil runs a company bigger than mine and has a family, right? So people are at different stages in their lives, and getting together online does not to play D&D does not appeal to them. And I don't think I already don't think that watching people play D&D is entertaining. I don't watch any D&D streams because I can't, it's crazy. It's just super boring. Like the amount of the juice in a 4-hour show is small. So then putting it on Skype or Zoom or whatever, where there's no natural discussion, it's super, people are always stopping and interrupting. And I've spent a lot of time in Discord chats, audio chats, and Zoom calls and stuff like that, and it never works. It's never the same. How to make encounters interesting and fun, but not too hard with 10 PCs? I don't know. I think that's too many. There's probably a way to dial it in terms of monsters, how much damage they do. The problem is that a monster, that's what action-oriented design, that's not exactly what action-oriented design is there to solve. I don't think it would solve it. It might get you a little bit of the way there, but the action economy, I think, is going to break down, unfortunately. I think 8 players is just too many. I've run for 8 players before and I regretted it. I've got a one-off coming up with new players who I don't know very well. Any advice? Asks Sam. I don't know. Don't sweat it too much. Just let them meet you halfway, right? Give them a good hook, get them playing, and then just see what happens. Be open to the possibility that some of these players are going to be more engaged than others, and that's okay. Don't try to solve every problem. Matthew threw me €5, a DM with ADHD. Often have difficulty doing the prep side. Then I submit that you're prepping the wrong things. Prep the stuff that engages you and is interesting to you and skip the other stuff and see what your players say. If I had 30 to 60 minutes to prep per session, what would I prioritize? Literally, I would prioritize encounters. I would say, here's the next encounter, and I would not necessarily worry about dramatically, how did we get here? What type of encounter am I interested in? What excites me as a dungeon master? Make that encounter. Don't worry too much about the narrative and the story. See what happens. If that's the game you can run and they don't like it, play something else. Play Talisman, play Catan, play Gloomhaven if you can afford it. Play something else. Play Robo Rally. Thoughts on Japanese RPGs? What JRPGs have I played? None. Xenogears, I think I played once, and I was surprised. Although it might have been Chrono Trigger, maybe I played both of them. I was surprised at how much like Champions it was, with literally an action economy where you can borrow actions from the future and stuff like that. That really kind of blew my mind. But no, I haven't really played. I'm not a big fan of computer RPGs, period. John Van Hoven, although I did people always bring up Dark Souls. I really like Dark Souls. I haven't played a lot of it, but I liked it a lot. John Van Hoven, can I recommend a character reference for role-playing Strahd? Oh, go read that original Dracula book. It's really good. It's a lot more modern than people give it credit for. Hannibal Lecter from Silence of the Lambs is a great reference. Actually, Hannibal Lecter from the Hannibal TV show is a great reference. Any news on the Illrigger? Yeah, I think you're going to get an Illrigger video in the next week or two. David Braz. How do I fit the entire dragon into a dungeon? That's a good question. Dragons can polymorph. Hey, it's Ziba Shu at 11:33, which is 4 hours ago. How did my previous experience trying to start a game company inform the way I built MCDM? So before MCDM started, my friends and I, a different group of friends from Pandemic Studios, started a much smaller company called Panic Volcanic. And, I learned a lot about how it was very different. We had to go around, we had to shop ourselves around and get capital investment or get a deal from a publisher, as opposed to MCDM, which was self-funded through Kickstarter. I don't think people know that the Kickstarter money, I had friends when I first started that Kickstarter and they saw what it did. They're like, what happens to this money? I'm like, it goes in my bank account. I don't think people it's not clear exactly what happens to that money, but I created another account for MCDM. But there are certain things about how a company is just the thing that the people who start it and run it decide that it is. Whatever you want to decide is what that company is and how it works. There aren't really rules for these things. You can create whatever rules you want. We had a business guy running a Panic Volcanic, a good friend of mine named Christian, who was my first boss. And that saved us a lot of headaches that probably MCDM is going to be dealing with. But we've done pretty well so far, and it's been 3 years. So just knowing that it could be done, dealing with Christian would be like, yeah, you just file to be an LLC and now you're a company. And you just decide this company is whatever we want it to be. And then I was good friends with the guys who ran, like literally owned and ran Turtle Rock Studios. You know, one of them is a player in my D&D game. And just seeing them, watching them for almost 10 years, run a company every day, I learned a lot. Mathematician, learned a lot about how to be a boss too, which, you know, is a process. It's not necessarily something I'm super good at. I want my game to be sandboxy and about player agency, but a hot start seems to go against it. Well, Mathematician, we talked about that in the video I did where I ran for some friends, and it was definitely a hot start, right? It was them in the bottom of the dungeon being chased by lizard folk. That was definitely a hot start. And all I needed to do was give them 2 or 3 encounters to get to the end of the dungeon, just 2 or 3. But I gave them like 12 and expected them to choose a path. But they did all of them. They went down here and then stopped and went back. They went down here and then stopped and went back. Actually, what they did was they went, right? And so they did all of them, and that was bad. But what they should have done is said, here, first session, 2 or 3 encounters, then go back to town. And once you're back to town, here's a bunch of different adventures you could go on. That's a good combination, I think. I'm super excited for Kingdoms of Warfare. How would I suggest best as a player to introduce it to the group and the DM? Well, I would put the book in front of them and say, hey, what do you think? Or I would look at one of the organizations and say, hey, what do you think about being an adventuring company? Like, not just we're a bunch of players and our characters are just grab-astic pieces of amphibian shit. Look at this. Look at these powers we get if we're an adventuring company. That's what I would do. Aiden Martinez threw me 129. I don't know what MX is. Moroccan, Mexican. How would I feel about the multi-class rule? I don't know anything about multi-classing. No idea. The fact that a barbarian can dual class into a wizard without a narrative reason makes them uncomfortable. Well, remember that characters don't know what classes are. A character does not know that they are a 3rd level barbarian. That is meta knowledge that the player has, but the character does not have. So somebody who is, you know, strong and hardy, wears highly mobile, wears a sword, and knows some magic, why not? The magic's out there. They could learn it. Why not? Do they have the stats for it? Why not? Like Fofford and the Grey Mouse are kind of in one character. Let's see what I've missed. Have you ever played by mail? Not really. Not really, Daniel T. Taylor, $50. Thank you. Do I have any ideas on how to motivate players in the early game if they haven't provided any backstories? I think it's sort of a sin to expect players to be too much motivated at the beginning. You know, are they excited to play D&D? I don't know. Like, I think normally the thing that excites players is their character. They're excited to play their character. If they're not, then you can just tell and ask them, is there another character that would excite you more? But the thing that excites them about playing the character could be really shallow. There's no cultural imperative that they have these deep, abiding reasons to play 3-dimensional characters and really engage with your world. I think you got to pull all that stuff back and just say, do they like playing their character? Are you having fun creating encounters and putting them in front of them? Then anything else is gravy. The Chunky Arab. Any experience with or thoughts with the Deadlands setting? Yeah, I love Deadlands. I played Deadlands. I played it. Did I run it? No, I played a couple different Deadlands games. One of the best RPGs ever. Don't believe the hype, 69. Awesome. I'm glad I got you back to the chair. You would have got there on your own. You didn't need me. Thank you for the five pounds. What are my thoughts about allowing other PCs to watch when one player character goes scouting or exploring solo? Eric, I have no problem with that. Like, most of my players are mature enough that they can accept the dramatic irony of I know something about what's happening that my characters don't. And you've seen me do this where the players go out and they even though the players all saw what happened, now we're going to do it again, except this time it's the character describing what they saw and the heroes, not their players, the heroes asking questions. And that can be really interesting and really fun. Obviously, I like sending players. We didn't do this a lot in the chain of background, which actually surprises me because it's pretty common for me to send the players outside the room and just deal one-on-one, because I really, really like when the player has to describe what their character saw, right? Because that creates this telephone game. The knowledge gets translated imperfectly, but realistically. And that is super important to me. Patrick Clark, €5. Hey, Matt, my players like using real dice online, but they suspect a fellow player of fudging. Yeah, I don't know. Like, accusing players of cheating is tricky. My friend Jim often says, man, if people feel like this thing that we do for fun, that it's so important for them to roll well that they cheat, he tends to turn a blind eye to it. It's like, we're here to have fun. You know, there is a certain amount of social contract that's being broken when you do that. I appreciate that. But you know, there is limited treatment available to people that don't want to go to the doctor. Right. So there's only so much you can do. You can say, listen, if we're all going to play online, then we're going to use the 3D dice or whatever. We're going to use this application's dice. You can just say that. You can just say, we're all going to do it. We're going to create a level playing field. I'm not accusing anybody of cheating. I just want to make sure that it's not something I have to worry about. You can do that. It sucks to feel like you have to confront somebody about cheating. So we're here to have fun. You could even do that. You could say, listen, we're all here to have fun. I don't think everybody's idea of what makes it fun is the same. I think some people are maybe behind the scenes kind of cheating on their die rolls, and that ruins the fun for me. Just be honest. That ruins the fun for me. Without calling anybody out, say that ruins the fun for me. So what I'm going to do is we're all going to use this virtual die app and call it good and see what happens. I have cheated as a player. I was probably 17. I cheated as a player rolling stats once. I don't think I ever did it again because I felt bad afterwards. There's an author, I don't even remember who it was, who said, if you feel bad after you did it, then it was wrong. And that is good. A good person isn't someone who never does bad things. A good person is someone who, when they give in to temptation, when they make a moral error, they feel bad about it afterwards, and then they work to not do that again. That is a moral person. It's that feeling of, oh God, that was terrible. Why did I do that? I regret this. I regret this. That is a person who has learned something and is growing and is becoming a better person. So there was a great podcast that I'm sure a lot of you people listen to where they, as part of one of the episodes, this is a real life crime drama. They went to I don't know what they call a high up mucky muck in Islam, a church official, and said, when this kid was 17, he stole money from the church's collection plate. How do you feel about that? And I was just completely blown away with what a brilliant answer this guy gave. And this is somebody who's in charge of a church that has hundreds of parishioners. And he said, that's just normal. It's just normal things teenagers do. They're experimenting. They're experimenting with morality. They're experimenting with what can they get away with? How do they feel when they do these things? And usually what happens is 95 times out of 100, they do something daring. They get a little bit of thrill out of it. Maybe they get some attention from their friends, but then afterwards when they're alone, they regret it. And they're like, what did I do? That was wrong. He said, not only do I not think that is a moral failing on the part of that teenager, I don't think that it points towards someone who's going to grow up to be bad. It's normal. It's normal. So be a little compassionate toward that person who's cheating, but at the same time, make it known that it's that you expect the table to be fair, and you expect a certain amount of sportsmanship, and you don't want to accuse anybody of anything. So let's just use this app. But I can't tell where's the accent. Is it Geoffrey or Geoffrey? Geoffrey? I bet it's Jordan. Is it Jordan or Jordan? Jordan $5. Thank you. You shouldn't have to throw me $5 for me to know how to pronounce your name, but I appreciate it. Destin, would I recommend PC use the sending spell to troll the big? I don't know. I don't know how the sending spell works off the top of my head, but that sounds like a great way to raise the stakes and increase drama. Use sending to troll the villain. Tishman Kites. God, if I pronounce that right, I'm a fucking hero. €5. Thank you. Hey, Matt. Hello. Thanks for all your awesome videos. Well, thanks for yours. I'm finishing my first campaign this weekend. It started over a year ago with the Delian Tomb. I think if MCDM continues to be successful, and I have reason to believe it will, but you never know. The future is uncertain. And most startups fail. Then I think we'll see a Vasloria adventure that is 7-8 levels and features a lot of the Kingdoms and Warfare stuff and a lot of that kind of classic medieval European fantasy wilderness stuff. And I think it's probably going to start with an upgraded version of the Delian Tomb because it's mine and it's really successful. Luneth Fujisaki. Strongholds and followers by her, thank you. What happens when a unit gets wiped out? It gets wiped out. Does the PC lineage take damage? Nope. No, what happens when a unit breaks, which means it suffers its last casualty. When a unit breaks, you got to think about it as like it dissolving. Some of those people are dead, but not all of them. Some of them have just run away. Some of them are still there, but they're too confused to follow orders. They've lost what's called unit coherency. So at the end of the battle, every unit that broke makes a rally check, and if they succeed, they reform with like one casualty, right? If they fail, then that unit is disbanded, and a disbanded unit is gone forever. So you can break, in which case you're just not in the battle anymore. You're removed from the battle, but you still exist notionally. Then at the end of the battle, you make a check to see, now that everything's done, now that we're done and the fighting's over, can I literally go rally my troops and turn this unit back into a thing? And there are ways to rally units during the battle, but only certain classes have access to those abilities. Those are already designed already, and they're super fucking cool. The Peach, $5, thank you. Thank you for advice on asking friends to play the villains. By the way, 90% of my friends who play NPCs, they're just playing NPCs. They're not playing villains. They're just playing high-level NPCs who are their former characters still involved in the politics of the world. JG asks, by the way, folks, I haven't looked live at chat. I've just been following the mods. How do you folks feel like this stream has been going? Because all I've been doing is answering questions, and I feel like the questions have been good, and I'm pretty happy with the answers. I haven't yet trolled anybody. 5 out of 7, I'll take that. Seems like people are happy with it. Thank you, Pesto. Good. The YouTube streams are very different than the Twitch streams. The Twitch streams are much more chill. With the flip side is that Twitch streams, I tend to get frustrated with people. Some people ask dumb questions sometimes, or what I perceive as dumb questions, and I just roll my eyes and I get sarcastic with them, which is not good. It means every time I do that, I lose a fan. I realize that. But the YouTube questions, so many people show up on YouTube that if half the questions are good, that's a hell of a lot more really good questions in a YouTube stream. And also a lot of the Twitch stream viewers, they're there every stream, they're there every week, and so it starts to get harder and harder to generate exciting dynamic content for them. If you threw money at me and asked a question and I don't get to it, I apologize. There's no guarantee that I will answer your question, but I do my best. Marcus Rosen, thoughts on constructing pantheons? Pantheon! And establishing their relationship with the world. I did a whole series on this. It's not part of running the game, but it's building capital. I suggest you check it out. People who watch the capital world building streams get a lot out of them. They get a lot out of them because I literally am sitting there building effectively an entire world, the city of capital, its pantheon from scratch. And I show you exactly how I create pantheons. And the high level advice is gods represent the mores and folkways of the culture. Usually the mores. What are those? Right? Not all cultures have a trickster spirit because not all cultures value that, Robin Hood style kind of jester character. Some cultures consider that disrespectful and they would not have a god of that. So, like Vaslorian's gods are very different than anybody else's gods. Like Vaslorians literally think that hard work makes you honest, that only an honest person can do hard work. So they have a ritual that has not died out, even though now they have laws, right? Now they have laws written down. They have this ritual left over from when there weren't written down laws, where if there's a dispute in a town, they will literally have the defendant and the accuser and the accused build a fence. Something that these two people are going to sit there and they're going to do hard labor doing something that benefits the town, and whoever gets tired and quits first, or whoever does the worst job, is guilty or is in the right. Because the Vaslorians believe that hard work makes you honest and that only honest people can do hard work. And so they have a god of strength. They have a god of strength. But it's not might makes right. Like I'm strong, therefore I'm going to beat you up and I'm going to get my way. It's hard work makes you honest. That's what that god represents. They also have a god of justice. Lots of cultures in Orden do not. They do not have this god of righting wrongs. So that's super important to me. Contrast the Vaslorian gods with the gods of Rioja. Completely fucking different. Like the gods of Rioja are this elaborate family structure because they're a lot more family oriented. So their gods are all related to each other and marry, and they're a soap opera. The gods of Rioja are a huge soap opera with gods of assassination and romance and poetry and art and stuff like that. Vasloria doesn't have any of that nonsense. Richard Pointer, $5 in the middle of a multi-year writing project. Stuck on part 5 or 6. Do I have ways to get myself in the mood and push forward? Yeah, I watch movies, typically. Even something like The Mandalorian, which I like, but I don't think is great, can inspire me to do stuff. Playing D&D, not running it, playing D&D inspires me. Bundologus gave me 2,000 huffs. That's a lot of huffs. I had one huff last night and I almost went into a time vortex. Matt, your advice has been critical for my growth as a DM. Thank you. I'm glad. I do occasionally think of myself as an educator. I know that sounds highfalutin, but it's true. You often say you like introducing new people in the hobby. What were the 3 most important things you tell them? We're playing D on Thursday night. See you there. That's it. I literally work with, because I work in a nerd industry and everybody that I work with is a nerd. When I meet people that I think that person's cool, they would like playing D&D, I would like playing D&D with them. And a lot of these people, like Lars, for instance, a lot of these people, the thing I like about them is how serious they are and their attention to detail. I didn't pick that person because they're theatrical. Actually, I tend to kind of, the more kind of over the top and theatrical somebody is, I tend to be like, no, go away, leave me alone. That's not what I like in a player. So it doesn't necessarily make a good stream, but it makes me happy as a dungeon master to have players like that. And these are people who often have never played any tabletop games of any kind. Board games, card games, none of that stuff. They just play video games. That's super common in the video game industry. It's usually only like 20% of the people at any given company play board games at all. So I'll go to these people and I really like them. And I'm like, this person would enjoy playing tabletop games. And I'll just tell them we're playing. You're going to be there. I heard a yes. I say that a lot. Hey, are you around on Thursday night? We're playing D&D. And I don't wait for them to start answering. I go, I heard a yes. That only works if these people like you. Don't be an asshole. It's okay to be an asshole as long as you're their kind of asshole. That's something I've learned in life. Oh yeah, Landramon, thank you for the 14 Canadian buckaroonies. I'm probably going to start doing, I have an idea for a series of, that I think will be really popular. Because there's only so much D&D advice I can give when I'm not running D&D. So I cast about looking for other things to talk about that I think the audience would like. And I think I'm probably going to start doing a series on how I would run a given adventure. How would I run Red Hand of Doom? How would I run Curse of Strahd? And actually using the modern adventures, because I have not run them, but saying, here's how I would do this, I think would be valuable. So Red Hand of Doom would certainly be on there. Red Hand of Doom is a great adventure, period, and it would be a great adventure to do with something like Kingdoms of Warfare. Are my books available at friendly neighborhood game stores? No. Thank you for the $5, David. No, because MCDM is an expensive company. We pay our people really competitively, like competitive with video game salaries. And that costs money. I think it produces a better product. I think Strongholds and Followers is the worst thing that we've produced. I think everything is going to be better than it. Illrigger kind of has 1 foot in the old school Matt Colville stuff and one foot in the new, actually, I think well-designed MCDM stuff. But like Arcadia and Stronghold, Kingdoms of Warfare, I think are good, really, really well-designed. And that comes from paying Lars a really good salary to run the playtests. Like every day, Lars is managing the testers, getting feedback, discussing it with me or discussing it with James, and corralling all that information. He also does a whole lot of work getting the books printed and stuff, and going out and finding manufacturers to do things like decks of cards. So all that costs money, and the way we can afford to do it is we price our products what I consider to be fairly, but we make all that money. Like maybe it costs this much to print the thing. We make all this money. And we use it to pay our employees because I think that is ethical and I think it makes a better product. And if we were in friendly neighborhood game stores, instead of us making this much and it taking this much to print, you know, there's operation costs, which is the cost of goods. It costs this much to print it. We get this. Nope, we would get this because the distributor would take this much and the retailer would take this much. And I appreciate that work that they're doing. But for me and the products we're running and the way I want to run MCDM, we couldn't afford to do that. We couldn't afford to be in friendly game stores. Not right now, maybe in the future. Maybe there's a product that we could go wide with. And there could be good reasons to do that. You know, making this much when you're selling 10 times more could be worth it. Could be worth it. So I'm not saying it's always going to be like this, but for now, Audrey, $10, thank you. My videos are very calming to watch. Hello, hi. Welcome to the Matt Colville live stream. I'm your video DJ. I always sound like I'm wigged out on Quaaludes. Actually, that doesn't sound wigged out on Quaaludes. Audrey, I hope you were here for the modular music. It's very, very calming. And what small details go a long way into making the game feel real for players. Things like clothes and food, colors and smell, fabrics. You know, Audrey, there's probably something in the real world that you're interested in. I don't mean necessarily like as a hobby, but just in general, some aspect of life. And then you take that stuff and you build it into your game. You know, George R.R. Martin seems to like food based on all the evidence. So he puts a lot of elaborate food descriptions in his books. That's the only reason he does it, is because he likes that stuff. So, you know, my mom was a costume designer in theater, and she really was into dyes and fabrics and the history of all that stuff and where it came from and technologies. And, you know, we have computers because of medieval embroidery. It was in a direct line. So that stuff, you know, go watch Connections or go watch The Day the Universe Changed. Go read The Time Traveler's Guide to England. Go read Medieval Lives by Terry Jones. And what details fascinate you? Like I was reading, excuse me. Let me see if I can find this. Actually, God, I can't take too long. I can't take too long on this because it can take quite a lot of time to this is it. I found it. So this is something I'm going to describe. I don't know if this is going to be in my next novel. It might be distracting. It's hard to describe why I might think that is true. But this thing I'm about to describe is a real thing people in the Middle Ages really did that I learned about when I read Barbara Tuchman's book, A Distant Mirror. A Distant Mirror is much harder to read than The Guns of August, but it's super, super interesting. You learn a lot about how people live. Like A Distant Mirror is where I learned about the fact that like women in the Middle Ages, you know, we're talking about the 13th century, the 1200s, they wrote a lot. Not compared to now, obviously, but it's not true that only men wrote stuff. There are lots of, books. We would look at them and see probably like scrolls, right? But there were lots of books written by women about keeping house, about embroidery, about cooking, about all the things that women did in the Middle Ages. Some of these people were nuns, etc. But none of them ever wrote about raising children. Isn't that interesting? They did it. They did a lot of it, but none of them ever wrote about it, because only 1 in 12 children live to be 3 years old. So this is a culture that is affected by the fact that children tend to die a lot. So you don't put a lot of, you don't invest a lot emotionally into newborns, because the odds are they're not going to make it. And how does that reflect it in their culture? Well, they didn't write about it much. They probably didn't talk about it much, right? Because you never knew. You never knew which kids were going to make it, quote unquote. So this is something else I learned. I'm about to read you an excerpt from my 3rd novel, not yet published, in which Garth has attacked Tegan, and they've had a conflict, which I actually have written already, and I read on the stream. Some of this isn't going to make any sense to you, but even if you don't know anything about my novels, this is short, and it will explain how I take details that I find interesting about the medieval world, and I build it into my game. He won't come at us like that again, Ainsley said. That was a fluke, unplanned. He saw the opening and took a chance. Tactical. I think Ainsley has a voice. I'm not going to do the voice. Ainsley is, like a lot of my halflings, would be like, he won't come at us like that again, Ainsley said. That was a fluke, unplanned. He saw the opening and took a chance. Tactical. Tegan watched the little thief. You know him? Ainsley shrugged. Not as well as this one. He threw Hayden a look. Tegan adjusted his position in the chair and watched to the arrogant for a moment. How well do you know him? Tegan asked. I know him, Hayden said tonelessly. Does he have a weakness? Something we can exploit? The arrogant didn't say anything right away, like he wasn't aware there was anyone sitting with him. He took a drink of cider, put his glass down, and took a long breath. There's this game they still play, he said. In some of the shithole villages the Kaleen Empire couldn't be bothered to civilize. They hang a cat upside down by its tail from a pole, and it dangles there, howling, while the townsfolk compete to see who can be the first person to beat it to death without using their hands. Just bashing the thing over and over again with your face until it finally dies helplessly in pain and anger and terror. Great fun. The people all laugh and cheer, especially when the cat really manages to sink its claws into a person's face. They just want to see somebody in pain. They don't care who. Somewhere out there's a town that stopped doing this because a kid named Garth always won. A single blow, he said. I think he was probably 9 or 10. Took him a while to learn, but there were plenty of cats to practice on, he said. Hayden stood up, finished his cider, held the empty glass. Do you think cats have a sense of justice? Even a tiny one? He shrugged. A little bit of hypocritical anger inside them at how capricious the world can be sometimes. He put the glass on the table, looking at it, his face clouded over like someone was telling him something difficult to hear. Then he mastered himself and nodded. I bet they do, he said, and turned and walked out of the inn. So that tells you a lot about Garth. Like, he's basically a sociopath. He wanted to be good at this thing, murdering a small creature. He wanted to be good at it. So he practiced on his own until he could kill a cat with one shot without using his hands. No remorse. So that's a real detail from a book I read about the... So you learn a lot about Garth, and you learn a lot about Hayden. Like, how does Hayden view that? Hayden serves Kaval, not Adun. Adun is the god of strength. Hayden serves, and Adun is the god of his people. Like, he was raised, his father was born in Andrim, so his father follows Adun. His father is 100% a follower of Adun. When you've met him in Thief, you've met Hayden's father, and you can see, like, he literally, Hayden working is the solution. Here's a shovel, help me. Hayden working is the solution to all his problems. His father really believes that, but Hayden doesn't follow a Dune. Hayden follows Cabal, the god of justice. So how does Hayden view that whole thing? He views it through this lens of how unjust that is. He doesn't talk about how terrifying Garth is as an enemy. That is true. Garth is terrifying as an enemy. And Hayden knows that. He doesn't talk about how cruel and disgusting that is. How it, no. He talks about how wrong it is to even cats, who are the most unjust creatures that we interact with, who love torturing small animals that they play with. Do you think cats have a little tiny sense of justice? He says a hypocritical. Cats are gleefully unjust. He's like, yeah, I bet they do. Even a cat deserves someone to revenge them. Eli Dirks, thank you for $10. Fighter release date, I have no idea. I thought maybe this year, but COVID-19 really put the kibosh on that. It took a lot of work just to get Kingdoms and Warfare where it is right now. So definitely I would like to, we're all working hard to get MCDM to the point where I don't have to spend all of my time designing and iterating on these incredibly complex systems for D&D. I can just work on stuff like making videos, running D&D. James Introcaso can manage the production of more future books that will be easier to make, like monster books, adventure books, setting books, normal stuff, not these big elaborate. And when we get there, then I'll be able to go back and work on Fighter, and I will. Carmagen, thank you for the 2,000 huffs. Represent. I don't know what huff is. Nope. I tried. Trey McLemore. I probably got that one. There's not actually an A in there. $20. Thank you for all your work. Thank you. 3/4 of your players have either started their own campaign. Enjoy it. You're in heaven. Thank you very much. That makes me super happy. I think we started at 11. It's almost 1 o'clock. Mods are having to tap out. So I think now is a good time for us to stop. I apologize if you threw us money. A Hungarian forint. A lot of amazing American scientists came from Hungary. No, it's not Hungarian. Never mind. Lord Duroc just threw me a curveball. Honduran. I used to know a lot about Honduras. I don't anymore. I did a report on Central America when I was a kid. Yeah, Creevy, I think we will do. I have on my short list of upcoming videos, I think going over a video going over demons and a video going over devils, I think would be fun. So we will definitely do that. It's Hungarian forint indeed. Chat was trolling Duroc, and then Duroc passed on the troll to me. A lot of really famous American physicists were all Hungarian. So I think we're going to stop, everybody. I hope you had a good time. If you threw money at me in the anticipation that money would earn you answer to your question, I apologize. I can't get to all of them. It's literally impossible. But I thought the stream went really well. And next time we do a running the game video, we will do another live stream. If you liked hanging out, I encourage you to follow us on Twitch. We get together usually once or twice a week on Twitch. Sometimes just to play games like NetHack or Rocket League or Star Citizen. Maybe tonight. Maybe some Star Citizen tonight. And those chats are a lot more casual and hangout and sometimes more personal. Obviously, these chats tend to focus on D&D, but not always. People ask me about running MCDM and stuff like that. People often ask me questions about writing or game development. So thanks for hanging out, everybody. I really enjoyed this. I love doing these things. The last video seemed to be a lot of fun, and people got, it was a lot of fun to write and record, and people seemed to get a lot of value out of it, and that makes me happy. So I don't know what the next video is, but I have an idea. Stay tuned. No spoilers. Thanks to the mods who do an enormous amount of work to keep our community awesome. Come by our Discord, which is huge and has tons of active users in it, and lots of different channels you can talk about cool RPG related stuff and other random chaos stuff. I hope you folks all have a great weekend. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate you. I appreciate this community. Until next time, be seeing you.